And so that is really interesting because if you think about the history of Rome, it went from kings to the republic to the empire.
But even then,
And
the Republic was like rife with with a lot of corruption
oh,
because
loads, so much corruption. And even then, the empire was as well. I mean, it's only,
right. I
if
mean,
you
the
look at
Empire's a
the
different animal altogether, though. I mean,
exactly, if you look at the history of the empire, there's only one or two who die of natural causes. If you look at cause of death, son, wife, Praetorian Guard, murder, assassinated, it's a very dangerous career. But if you think about the point of of Shakespeare's Roman tragedies, it could be talking about the uh, republic versus monarchy, republic versus empire. And at the time, if you think about the expansion of the Elizabethan uh, uh, Britain at the time, it was expanding over the world. You had Virginia being
mhm.
coming into existence. You have the expansion of what would later become the British Empire. This is the start of it. There's a lot that happens in between, but you have this kind of taking over of the world as they saw it then.
Yeah.
So you have this making the commentary of Roman, you know, what's the difference between a republic and a monarchy? What's the pros and cons? So if you're doing that in a play, which I've said before is the mass media, it's the TikTok of its day. What should we do? Let's go and watch a play. Oh, what are we seeing? Julius Caesar, fantastic. Oh, look, a tyrant. Oh, that makes me think. Is our current ruler a tyrant? Oh,
Shakespeare was 100 years early on the scene. I mean, it
mm.
would take Cromwell to kind of realize that. I mean, can we call it a Shakespearean dream of republicanism? I mean,
To be honest, I like to think that Shakespeare was, um, not not that subtle. I like to think that Shakespeare went, oh, do you know what? It's a good play. Uh, yeah, it sounds like a good plot. I'll do that. And at the end of the day, he died as a gentleman. It's on his gravestone as a gentleman. It's not a playwright. It's not a poet. On his gravestone is here lies William Shakespeare, a gentleman. And he's seen his father go through financial ruin and scandal and hardships. At the end of the day, he was a businessman, Shakespeare. He wanted money. It doesn't take him very long into his playwriting career before he buys the new place in Stratford and therefore gives his family security.
yeah,
He
doesn't he
has money.
doesn't he purchase coat of arms for his father?
Yeah, his father gets the coat of arms. I'm just going to double check the date because I can't remember off the top of my hand. But John Shakespeare, the glove maker, served
Yeah.
time on Stratford City Council. He unfortunately went into some corrupt scandals, um, but eventually the coat of arms. What was it? Shakespeare coat of arms. Um, he was declared a gentleman, had the right to a coat of arms, and now he has money, he has income, and he's thinking, do you know what? That's really good. I like this. What plays do people want to see? The first play he wrote was one of the Henrys, and Henry the Fourth, Henry the Sixth, Part Two, and people loved it. So he wrote Part Three, and then people wanted to know what happened first, so he wrote Part One.
It's
He
like
wrote what
I
the
mean, this is the original like MCU before
yes,
before
no,
we got it. Yeah.
it's the origin story. He does, Henry the Sixth. This is the story. Right, we need a sequel. Brilliant. Right, we need to know the prequel, and he does it, and you can
Oh
see,
yeah, so
well,
It's like Star Wars actually because you get
yes,
the original trilogy first, and then 30 years late, and then I guess 20 years later you get the prequel with
yes,
with Anakin
but
Skywalker.
yeah, but I was going to say something, a comment about Jar Jar Binks being Falstaff, but I couldn't quite make it make it fit in my thing. So yeah, the coat of arms was gifted to John Shakespeare in 1596.
Okay, gotcha.
So Shakespeare was writing then. He was what was 1596. So by then he'd already written Midsummer Night's Dream, Taming of the Shrew, Titus, Richard III. So he was well on his way to becoming, a very well known. But also in London at the time, you had this amazing situation where you had four of the greatest playwrights that England has possibly ever seen at the time. So you had Shakespeare who was in London at the time, Kit Marlowe was in time, Ben Jonson and Robert Greene were all in London at the same time, writing plays, writing literature. And then you had this real quirk where they're all trying to outdo each other, and then one by one, all of them disappear. And this is not me saying Shakespeare did them all in. This is just that Robert Greene, he drank himself to death. You got Ben Jonson got into a brawl and was arrested and then later died. Kit Marlowe and his bar brawl died. So you had suddenly all of Shakespeare's competitors were off the scene. So Shakespeare had spent this all time, and he didn't become successful by default. What he was doing, he was trying to outdo them all the time. They were all trying to outdo each other. Ben Jonson was trying to outdo Shakespeare, and Robert Greene was trying to outdo Kit Marlowe, and they were all trying to build themselves up. And then suddenly, three of them were gone.
It's
So
kind of like
Shakespeare,
it's kind of like London in the '60s when you had like the four major bands trying to outdo each other. If you think
yes,
about it,
absolutely. But then if you think then if those all four bands are trying to outdo each other, and then three of them stop,
it's like who killed the Who? Oh well,
who
I don't
killed the
know.
who?
What happened to the Stones? Oh well,
Wow.
we don't know.
Yeah.
What about the Kinks? Oh,
Oh
they got
no.
into a kinky situation. It's
But
just
then
the
you've got
Beatles
these
left.
yeah, these outlanders from Liverpool, the upstart crows, if you will,
Exactly.
suddenly they've done it and they've worked hard. And it wasn't by default. He was a great writer, but it just suddenly he had no competition.
Well,
And
what's also fascinating is the fact that out of all of them, Shakespeare, you would think he didn't have a chance because he didn't he didn't go to university.
no,
The most education he got was from the local grammar school,
yes.
right?
Yeah, he would have done. But the thing is, that was enough because, he had that basics of reading, the writing, the Latin, and that access to books. You see it all the time. The tale of Hamlet comes from an old Viking saga. The tale of Amleth where the uncle was avenged. You know,
Right, right.
the tales of Macbeth
Or
are in that.
Cymbeline too, because
Yes,
that
all
was based on a Celtic legend, wasn't it?
I can't. I don't know. I'm not too familiar with Cymbeline, but I know that
Okay.
Macbeth was a real person. Obviously, it's not the Macbeth that we see in the play, but the real Macbeth. I love this fact. Is actually mentioned in the Viking sagas because they were trying to invade the lands of Orkney, and they were kept getting trouble from the local king. And if you do the timelines, it's actually Macbeth. So the Vikings were coming over trying to take over these lands in Scotland, and Macbeth was fighting them back. I think that's wonderful. Just that even the Vikings didn't like Macbeth.
And that
Um,
that's I was gonna say at that time too. I mean, we're talking about when the printing press is like it's become an institution. Like now you're starting to get more. It's kind of like the birth of the internet. It's where information is
yes,
starting to become more freely available. So
yes,
had he lived in the 15th century, he probably wouldn't have
yes.
had as much access to information as he did 100
Mm,
years later.
no, exactly. I mean, just the amount of information that he writes so much about Italy, Shakespeare. So why does he write about Italy? I mean, when you grow up and you study writing, the tutors will always tell you the same thing: write about what you know. So why does Shakespeare write about Italy so much? There's only
Yeah, there's
one
nothing
solution.
going on over there.
There's nothing going on over there, but yet he writes about it. Othello is set in over there. The Merchant of Venice, Gentleman of Verona, Taming of the Shrew is set in Padua and Verona. Romeo and Juliet is set in Italy. All these
Wasn't
things.
Twelfth Night set in Italy also?
Twelfth Night, I think it's Twelfth Night as well. It's set in Italy.
Okay.
The Tempest. It's not directly in Italy, but it's the Duke of Milan who's a main character. So all these things are Italian, and you have to go. Well, why are you there? So lots of scholars have gone. Well, that's because Shakespeare spent his lost years in Italy.
But there's no evidence for that though.
Exactly. It's hypothesis. It's the scholars. It's those lost years. I think my favourite one is that he was imprisoned for poaching. I like that one. I've just got this image of William Shakespeare carrying a boar out of a forest, and some guards coming up to him. Where did you get that boar? I found it. I just got this lovely kind of image of Shakespeare trying to kind of talk his way out of being arrested. But I mean, you are absolutely right, and that again is a really good point because Shakespeare was a nobody. That's why we don't know anything about him. He was a nobody. He was an oik from Stratford. He was an upstart crow, to quote Robert Greene. He came to London and nobody knew who he was. And that is it is very much the tale of history. History is written about the rich people, the kings, the queens, the lords, and you get the court records. If someone's done something wrong, but he doesn't appear in those. So he's obviously not been arrested. So he's bumbling around doing something. He's obviously doing enough to survive because he crops up later. His name's not on the death records. We've got him being married to Anne Hathaway. We've got him suddenly. Then we get him writing plays, and that's when his name starts becoming real, and that's when he gets more written about him. But because he was a nobody, we don't really know anything about him. So what he did in the lost years is a mystery. He knows lots about Italy. So was he in Italy? We don't know. He writes about wars. Was he a soldier? We don't know. He writes the way he writes about love is very interesting as well. Because if you look at some of his early plays, such as Taming of the Shrew, Love Labour's Lost, even A Midsummer Night's Dream, the way he writes about love is very different to how he writes about love later on. So it suggests that his view on love has changed. I mean, does that mean that he wasn't in love with his wife? Does that mean that he fell in love with someone else later on? Again, we just don't know. And that's the beauty of Shakespeare, is the ambiguity of everything we find.
Well, I'll go even further and say it's kind of irrelevant when you think about it, because it doesn't add or
Well,
detract from the work that we have.
and that is absolutely brilliantly put. I'm reading Taming of the Shrew at the moment, and the prologue that this author has written. He says, if you read Taming of the Shrew, it's dreadful, it's awful, it's misogynistic, it's cheap laughs, it doesn't kind of make sense. And then you go and see it on stage, and it's funny. It's brilliant. The interplay between them, the farce that unfolds before your eyes is wonderful. And that's what it's for. Shakespeare on the stage being really kind of, oh, that's brilliant. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't detract from it. Whether he was in Italy, whether he fell in love, whether he was in love with the Earl of Southampton or the mysterious Dark Lady, who cares? He just wrote brilliant plays. And
Right.
that's why people kept going to see them. People in the Tudor times were very, very vocal. If they didn't like something, well, they would probably burn your place down or stone you or throw vegetables at you. They certainly wouldn't keep going back time and time and time again. And people would go back and they say, right, give us Henry VI Part Two. We want to see that one again. And some of these plays were being performed 2, 3 times a day, sometimes, and people would turn up. And that is the power of the politics which comes back into it. And Shakespeare was very much at the whim of his patron. So the Lord Chamberlain would say, right, I want you to make this play. Here's some money. Write me this play. It comes later on when he becomes a patronage of the king. So we've got 1603, James I, James VI coming over. And James VI, as he was, became a self-proclaimed expert of the witch. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to read his demonology book. Um, it's interesting.
Yeah, wasn't
Um,
it? I heard somewhere he'd been influenced by Malleus Maleficarum, because I
yes,
because I
there's
read
something.
because I read Roland Hutton's book The Witch, and he did touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, because basically James VI was born and instantly became king. He was crowned king at about a week old, and there's records that the earliest assassination attempts happened around about that time. So from his birth, he was the subject of assassination attempts. So he grew up so paranoid, it was unbelievable. Literally anything or anyone could be a target. Didn't trust anyone at all. And out of that fear, when we have the instance when he's sailing to England, and then there was storms, and
Right.
all it took was one person to say, that's the local witch. That seed was planted in his mind,
I was
and
gonna
that was the
Yeah,
go on.
I was gonna say there's a documentary that Tony Robinson did.
Oh, Baldric.
Yeah, Baldric. He did a series called Gods and Monsters, and there's an episode about the witch that actually touches on the trial of the woman who was accused of summoning the storm to kill
Agnes Sampson.
James. Yes, Agnes Sampson. That's right. So I highly recommend everybody watch that because it's such a good
Yes.
episode.
I mean, then you get the witch law in 1604, which is passed, which means that there's a instant hanging to anyone who's confirmed of being a witch, and then suddenly after that you get 1623. Is it the Salem witch trials?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here, over in Massachusetts, and not and also too on the continent because because you have the 30 Years War going on in Central Europe. That's when you start to see a higher proliferation of the witch trials.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a video that a Catholic priest was saying that there would be instances where you would have dueling exorcisms, where a Catholic priest and a Protestant pastor would try to, they would come into town one week and try to drive out a demon and see, which one could do it better, and whoever won, that town would convert to the faith of whoever drove the demon out. So it's such a ridiculous scenario, but I mean that was the period that they lived in, because religion and politics were very much intertwined.
I mean, have you heard of the witch finder General Matthew Hopkins?
That he's more of like during the Civil War period, isn't he?
He was. I mean, I mention him just because I find his kind of the whole thing kind of very farcical.
Because he gave himself that power. He gave himself that authority, didn't he? Like nobody, like neither Parliament or the king were like, they're like, listen, we're busy fighting a war. You do whatever the hell you want to do.
Whatever. And he would go and say, right, well, every witch I find, you pay me. And he always found witches. It just just unbelievable. So we've got James VI coming to the throne. And Shakespeare, again, a canny businessman. He knows where his bread is buttered. And he's very smart in the way that he doesn't I'm going to say the word piss off because I can't think of another phrase to say, but doesn't bite the hand that feeds. He knows. You got people before like Ben Jonson, who was always up for a bit of controversy. And then Shakespeare's like, no, no, I'm not playing with fire. I know I can write my plays and have a lovely, stable income. Thank you very much. So he writes this play, Macbeth, and it's a wonderful play. It is such a good play, and he introduces the Weird Sisters. He's writing it 1606, so it's fresh. 1604 was the witch law. He's writing this 1605, 1606. So we've had the gunpowder plot, and there's all the theories. Have you read Claire Asquith's book about the shadow play? You said you were a Catholic before, about all the Catholic interplays, and I think one of the things that came into my mind was there's the scene where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are talking, and he's got doubts, and she says, I would rather have plucked the babe from my nipple and dashed its brains on the rock. And that dashing the brains of the rock is from Proverbs and from Psalms.
Right.
So it's very biblical. So you can see these Shakespearean Catholic links coming through, and she puts forward a great argument that he was raised a Catholic.
Because his mother Mary, because the Ardens they were Catholics, weren't they?
They were.
Whereas the Shakespeares, they were kind of on the fence, but they sort of converted because it was just politically expedient.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then don't forget, you got the Act of Uniformity in 1558.
That's right. That's right.
Which just said you had to go to Anglican Mass, or not Anglican Mass, but you had to go to Mass once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And what you did the rest of the time was absolutely open, which was kind of a nice loophole for a lot of Catholics. So you've got this kind of Shakespeare's Catholic showing through a lot of his plays. So
well, to go back to, well, I was going to say, to go back even further to Hamlet. I mean, when Hamlet sees his father, he does mention he is in a purgative state, which would apply to the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. Yeah.
Yes, you do. And then the praying scene where he talks about the mark of Cain. You know, the very biblical kind of
Yeah, because he killed Abel. Yeah.
yes, exactly, the murder of brothers, the original fratricide. So there's a lot of biblical references in Shakespeare's work. So you have Macbeth, the witches coming through, and it's clearly he's trying to suck up to his new patron. He talks about witches. It's set in Scotland. Scotland comes through as being brilliant. You've got that really, and it's really hard scene to watch between Malcolm and Macduff when they're talking about Scotland. Oh, Scotland, and oh, I just had to do the accent there, and that was really embarrassing. I shouldn't have done that, but never mind.
No,
You've got this lovely.
listen. I do accents all the time, so
Fine,
you were
it's
in good
fine.
company.
It's fine. So they have this big scene about Scotland and making sure Scotland's brilliant. And then the scene where he's talking about the descendant of kings, implying that James the First was the descendant of Banquo, the true kings of England. And you get this whole kind of thing. And they get called to the court to play it. And James doesn't like it. And I'm just thinking, oh, crikey. Okay, that's okay. Didn't hate it because it had witches in it. And, Shakespeare's obviously gone dipping in the Book of Demonology to get some correct witch facts in there. And he's sucked up to James. And James gone, oh, that's okay. But we know that Shakespeare got away with it because for the rest of the time he was alive, he was still sponsored by the king. And if the king had been that annoyed, he wouldn't have continued it. And I've recently found out a great fact. I was looking into the curse of Macbeth, and that the original Lady Macbeth died before the first performance. The actor playing Lady Macbeth died, and the only one that knew the words who could understudy was William Shakespeare. So William Shakespeare was the first Lady Macbeth.
I did not know that.
I know. I was like, that's brilliant. So you have to go into the palace, perform to the king your new sucky up play, and you have to play Lady Macbeth. Brilliant. I absolutely love that. So we have Macbeth being a kind of political kind of thing because he wants to kind of show his political allegiance. And I think James would have liked it because if you play Macbeth to an audience, your mass media, they're going to go, oh, yeah, so James is the true king of England. Right, I've got that. Okay. It would appease the masses. They would get their information from the plays of the day. And whatever they would see, they would take because they can't read it for themselves. They go on the kind of popularity of it. So you have lots of information being given to the people through the plays. If you think about, we've talked about the Roman plays, the difference between republic and monarchy. Then you look at the difference. Hamlet, King Lear, Macbeth, the nature of monarchy. Macbeth usurps the throne. He isn't the heir, and he comes a cropper. Therefore, if you are the heir to the throne, that's the divine right.